5 situations where 6 sensories can take back control in their relationships with 5 sensory people. So what are the 5 situations where a 6 sensory can take back control from a 5 sensory? The first one that I will start with is the one where they're in a fight. Basically, the 5 sensory at this point has left the room because they've become too overwhelmed with information, or maybe as the 6 sensory, you've left the room because you've gotten too overwhelmed with what the 5 sensory is trying to communicate to you. So when we learn about relationships, we learn that we have to communicate our needs and that we need to communicate to the partner about what we really want or need. Or maybe there's some information we need to disclose. Maybe something has happened, and in order to be in good faith in the relationship, we actually need to disclose some uncomfortable information to keep integrity in the relationship. And then the other person doesn't know how to receive that information, and it's caused a fight. Regardless of whatever has happened, the way to take back control is not to communicate more to the 5 sensory. It's also not to completely avoid the 5 sensory if they're trying to communicate with you, but rather think that less is more. Try to keep things as simple as possible and only communicate what you absolutely need to communicate in these difficult circumstances. Don't elaborate or add in emotional overtones to the situation. For example, if you have a medical issue going on that you need to disclose to your partner to keep integrity in the relationship, describe it as matter-of-factly as possible. Don't go into detail about your insecurities or what may happen to the relationship as a result of this medical issue. Just say, this is my medical issue, and I wanted to disclose it to you so it's not a surprise when we are doing X, Y, and Z, right? Just keep it as matter-of-fact as possible, because when we add our insecurities in and our emotional overtones, it can come across like manipulation. And if the 5 sensory is communicating to you something like that, what you need to do as a 6 sensory is just try to open your ears and listen deeply to what they're saying and witness what they're saying. They will feel very loved and very heard when you've done that. And the temptation for us as a 6 sensory is to filter whatever the 5 sensory is saying to us, is how is that going to affect our relationship with them? Is our relationship stable? Are we going to have a future together? And rather filter through that and make judgments, it's more important to just be open and listen. That's the best way your relationship is going to survive. And if you've been fighting and the 5 sensory has left and needs space, give them space as long as they need space, and let them come back to you when they're ready to talk. Because if you communicate too much information, you can be overwhelming them. 5 sensories, by definition, have one less sense than 6 sensories. We have our intuition, and we pick up on things that 5 sensories don't always pick up on. And when we share that with the 5 sensory, that can really scare them or freak them out. And so it's better to keep that information for yourself. It's okay to know things, but if you try to communicate or have it witnessed by somebody who doesn't have the same abilities, they're probably not going to receive your communication very well, and that can cause a fight. So the next situation where you can take back control as a 6 sensory is when you're facing a breakup. What if the 5 sensory breaks up with you and they don't really have a good reason? Maybe it's superficial. This happens a lot. The 5 sensory has turned their head and noticed somebody new, and maybe they don't want to admit it. They're trying to come up with some reasons to end things on a good note in their mind, and it's not very clear as to why their relationship is going to come to an end with you. In those situations, the way you take back control is, when it's confusing, don't ask them for more information. They're sending a communication to you that's confusing for a reason, and usually it's quite intentional, and they know what they're doing because they don't want to admit the ugly truth of what they've been up to. And so you don't have to get mad at them either. Just leave them alone and be quiet and reflect on that relationship when you're absolutely ready to get the life lessons from the relationship. Usually after about 6 months or so, when the wounds have really healed, you'll start to get a sense of why they might have broken up with you. And it can be different every single time. However, common reasons that people may break up in a confusing and superficial way, or maybe they just stop talking to you, is just because they've done something bad and they don't want to communicate to you the bad behavior, right? It's just easier to disappear, it's easier to ghost. That's often what's going on when you have a confusing breakup situation. And so the best thing you can do for them is just leave them alone and wish them well. We can all get into these situations as humans where we feel tempted. Sometimes we're in a partnership and maybe things have gotten a bit stale and another person comes in. However, the difference when you're a sixth sensory and you're trying to grow and improve yourself is that you're trying to act with an integrity, but a lot of people don't have the strength to do that. And so it's important to realize that you have that strength and you have that power. By not engaging in that behavior, you have more of a backbone, and it can feel like you're a victim in the moment. But if you've actually got more substance to your personality, more discipline to not engage in bad behaviors, then you're actually the more powerful one in the relationship, even if you've been broken up with. So have confidence in that and take back your control of your own life and do a better job of discerning the next person you're going to be in a relationship with. Now, the next situation where you need to take back control could be that the relationship hasn't ended. Maybe you haven't had a fight, but your partner has done something offensive. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. There are prank videos nowadays on the internet, if you've noticed them, about relationships. And the interesting thing is the gentleman will do something like put lipstick on a wine glass and then leave it for his girlfriend to find. Or he might send a text to his girlfriend saying something like, she's gone, you can come over. And these are kind of ways that one partner will tease the other into thinking that they're cheating to kind of freak them out, which I don't recommend doing, by the way. But this kind of behavior is becoming more common. Like, people will sometimes behave triggering in order to test their partner to figure out how jealous they are, right? Or to get a reaction. And so the important thing as a sixth sensory, if five sensories play these kinds of tricks on you and they're looking at the internet and there's always new ones coming out, basically the advice is the same regardless of whatever trick it is that they're doing. Always just stay calm. Just think about it, like, why would a five sensory want you to catch them doing something like that? Think about that. Why do they want to be caught? And it's usually to get a reaction from you, the sixth sensory. They're trying to figure out if you're really as calm and peaceful as you say you are, right? They're testing you, essentially. And so what you need to do is not react when they're behaving badly. That's probably the biggest thing. But if they're constantly doing it, like they're always finding little ways to try to make you jealous or get a dig in, then that's a sign of abuse, and you may need to set a boundary to end the relationship because you don't want to put up with any bad behavior. Having said that, if they've done it once or twice, you might just decide to just let it slide and let it go if they behave well most of the time. I think that's a very fair decision to make, and it's very personal depending on the situation and how the relationship has evolved. But if it's mostly good behavior and sometimes they behave badly, you might let it slide. But if it's a lot of constant bad behavior, then you may have to let them go. The next situation where you can take back control as a sixth sensory in a relationship with a five sensory is to just put your own growth first before the five sensory. And what do I mean by that? The thing about five sensories is they expect six sensories to make them into a god, essentially, and to make them the center of their lives and think about all the dreams like commitment and marriage and children. And there's nothing wrong with those commitments, but the problem is our society worships these things so much that people kind of expect you to worship them when you're in a relationship with them nowadays. It's like, oh, you're that rare person that's going to stick around and therefore you're like a god. And what you actually need to do instead is make your own growth the god. Now, that's a little bit different than making yourself the god. I wouldn't actually put it that way exactly, because we all have our human selves and our godlike selves. And so when you're putting yourself like a god, you could actually be inflating your own ego and becoming too arrogant, and that may backfire on you. But if you see it in the way that I'm putting my own growth first, or I'm going to try to be a better person and that's my most important priority in my life over this person who may or may not behave well, then that's going to put you on a good track in life. And the five sensory is going to do nothing but respect the hell out of that. They may disagree with you. For example, if you're a vegetarian and the five sensory is not, They may not agree with you, but they'll respect your commitment if you're very committed to it. But it doesn't have to be vegetarianism. There's so many positive things in the world to commit your growth to. And so the key is to put your commitment into that growth, that journey that you're on to be a better person. And when you put the commitment there over, celebrating this person in your life, people say, oh, you shouldn't put work before your relationships are more important. It depends on your work. So if you have a meaningless job that you hate, then maybe it makes sense to put your relationships first. But even that's a bit of a dangerous position. I think we all need to have a higher purpose or a higher calling in life, and that should actually come first before our relationships. The world is very troubled these days. I'm just looking out my window thinking about the environment, the wars. There's so much going on, and I don't mean to be negative, but all of these conflicts are going on can become opportunities for us to grow and to help the world. And that's what we should be putting first over our personal happiness. And when we're able to do that, ironically, personal happiness actually comes a bit more easily. People respect us because we're trying to do something that's good in the world. And the last situation where 6 sensories can take back their power and take back control in relationships with their 5 sensories when things aren't going so smoothly is when the 5 sensory is trying to get something out of you, like something financially, some form of material payback from you because they feel like they've invested their time and their energy, so you should be paying them back for that material time and investment. This is an interesting one because I feel that really love should be unconditional and you should go into a relationship to give, not to get, and yet at the same time you also have to be careful that you're investing in good people, and that can be so hard to discern nowadays. Everybody wears a mask, and so it's challenging to know when is it the right time to give, when is it the right time to invest, because we can be a giver and genuinely get it wrong and invest and give to the wrong people. And so the way that I think you can give that is the most deep and the most meaningful is by listening and witnessing another person. So the 5 sensories may not understand how to listen and witness themselves, but they feel it when they're heard and when they're witnessed. And when they feel heard and witnessed, they're more likely to learn from you, from your example. They may or may not, and you can't count on it or expect it, but that's a way you can give consistently every single time. That's a winning strategy. Now, if you want to give financially once in a while, small amounts, you could, but be very careful with this because some 5 sensories are sometimes scam artists and they start with small amounts and then they get bigger and then it's harder for you to say no, right? So be very, very careful giving money or giving materially in a relationship with a 5 sensory. However, there could come a time where some commitments you naturally do need to share finances. It could come up, and it just depends on the level of trust you have with the 5 sensory. And whatever you give, you need to be willing to lose. So if you put your life savings in a house to share with them and they want to get divorced, there's not much you can do. You have to make those decisions with your own discernment and with your own judgment to make sure that they're the right ones for you. And it's okay to say no. If they want something and it doesn't feel right in your heart, you're concerned that you're going to lose your life savings for whatever reason, it doesn't feel good. Don't do it. Just keep your money. And if they break up with you, they break up with you, But let them give first. Usually that's a good strategy because they enjoy the thrill of trying to win you over. Having said that, occasionally they'll want something back from you. It depends what it is. And so if you feel in your heart like it's a good match and intuitively it's a good vibration to give and you're okay with potentially losing whatever you give, that's, I think, the key ingredient in relationships to be successful between 5 sensories or 6 sensories. Give something that you're okay with potentially losing. If you don't feel good about having sex or giving your body, for example, don't give that to a 5 sensory. If you feel okay with it, like you can be intimate and you don't care if they break up with you, then you can choose to do that too. And that really depends on your intuition and how you feel in your physical body. And you really only know your physical body the best. So you're the one to make the judgment about that. People can give you timelines, and I understand like where they're coming from. They're trying to help. Having said that, I think we are all in charge of our own timeline of when we choose to become physically intimate, and nobody can tell another person what is normal. Like, only you can decide for yourself what feels normal to you.